last week's episode, we found out how the wine industry capitalizes experiences to push their business forward when we spoke to a family-owned winery, Waterford Estate. Solms Delta shared how they made their rich history a strength, and we explored how expensive a bottle of wine can cost. In the final week of this 4-part wine odyssey, we will learn the difference between Champagne and MCC. We find out how climate change could be threatening the wine industry and how rosé is made at an exclusive niche winery. We also get all of our final questions answered at one of South Africa's biggest and oldest distributors.
Hello, and from a sunny Cape Town, my name is Kafui.
I'm Emmeline, and we are at JC Leroux. The House of JC Leroux is one of the leading sparkling wine houses in South Africa. Located in Stellenbosch, the house offers tasting pairings as well as show and explain the difference between Champagne and MCC. Marina summarized what makes all wines different.
There's so many aspects that affect that final product in the bottle. And that comes everything from your terroir, your soil in which those vines were planted, to the cultivar, to the clone of the cultivar, to the way, the direction in which that vineyard slopes. Does it face the sun? Does it get afternoon sun? Is it near the coast where it gets cool air that blows over it to cool it down? And all those little aspects end up creating the final product that ends up in your glass.
Does someone experiment year in, year out, and then works out what's the best process for their vineyard? Is that how it works?
Yeah, again they all do it differently. Some get a recipe and that's what they do year in and year out for that particular vineyard. Others look at the grapes year on year and decide, right, well, this year the grapes, there was more rain, so the berries are bigger and probably not as concentrated, and therefore we will, use this particular process in the cellar.
Marina went on to explain what is meant by MCC.
So MCC is this method cup classique sparkling wine, and you're going to learn just now about the difference. So it's like champagne. Yeah, so it's like champagne, but we can't call it champagne. It's made in exactly the same style.
Jean showed us the production process for MCC.
The sparkling wines, or what we term carbonated sparkling wines, are actually products that we produce via machine carbonation. So you're using a machine to actually infuse a wine with carbon dioxide. And if you're looking where the most of your hard work, your time and your effort goes in, that is your method cup classique over here. So method cup classique refers to the classic Cape method, and it is also what we refer to as method champenois, so the traditional way of producing champagne over in France. Now what does that mean? We already know that we have a carbonated sparkling wine, okay? So this one doesn't use machine carbonation. Method cup classique actually uses bottle fermentation to produce the carbon dioxide naturally inside each and every individual bottle.
Now this is how to make an MCC.
What we have here, this is called remoage that you're seeing behind you. It's where we tilt the bottle so that all the yeast sinks into the neck. There are two methods of remoage that you are able to use. The old school method is your riddling rack right here up front, which was done by hand, and each day for about 8 to 10 weeks you would actually come and turn each and every individual bottle to make sure that all that yeast slowly sinks into the neck. And we have what we call our gyro pallet. It's the big machines that you see behind us over there, and each one holds about 500 bottles of bubbly, and it allows everything, this entire process of remoage, to happen by machine, and that takes about 3 to 4 days. Once that process is done, your bottles will be upside down, all your sediment will be sitting in the neck of the bottle, and then we bring it over here to our production line. You'll notice that some of the bottles, what they have is they have a crown cap on top. The crown cap is just currently sealing in the pressure, sealing in the yeast. So now what they're doing is they're putting it in this big round glycol propylene bath. It's a chemical solution that flash freezes the neck of the bottle. That way you're trapping the yeast inside of an ice block, which helps us to remove it very, very easily. So when it comes onto the line over here, you'll see in the top of the bottle there's this white sort of ice block just there in the top neck of the bottle, and that's now got your yeast in it. It goes across to this back machine behind me over here, which is known as disgorgement. And what happens is a vacuum sucks off the bottle cap, and the pressure inside the bottle expels the ice block and leaves you with your lovely clear bubbly.
Join us after the break where we find out what is meant by cool climate wine, and we find out how climate change could threaten the wine industry and what are the solutions.
Welcome to the Elgin Valley in South Africa, where most of the apples you may be crunching on are grown here. It's also the home of cool climate wine. My name is Kafui.
I'm Emmeline, and I'm very intrigued. We're also going to be finding out how climate change will be impacting the wine industry and what the solutions can be. Are you ready?
Let's go.
I'm excited.
Alrighty.
Known predominantly for their apples, the Elgin Valley is what is known as a cool climate region. Liesel from Paul Kluwer explained what this means.
Elgin Valley is the biggest apple growing region within South Africa. 60% of the apples that are produced for export comes from our valley. But the reason why this valley actually came to be, why we even started planting vineyards, is one of the viticulturists, Ernst Leroux, he did a study of wine growing regions within South Africa and was looking for cooler wine growing regions to grow wines. Because the cooler the wine growing region, the more intense your grape character, the varietal character comes forward.
As a wine region, you've got to be recognized by the wines of the wine board as such. So you need to have a minimum threshold in terms of vineyard footprint, etc. And sufficient vineyards have been planted by 1990 for then the Elgin Valley to get the classification as a recognized wine region.
The nice thing about that is all these amazing people who have planted now, because it's really put people like Richard, Shannon, you guys, all the guys putting Iona and vineyards here have really put Elgin on the map. So, which is quite exciting.
After the wine tasting, we were taken around the valley and shown the water reservoir before speaking to Richard about how climate change will impact the wine industry. How is climate change impacting winemaking?
The biggest question in terms of climate change within the Western Cape is not so much the increase or the small increase that we're going to receive, is obviously population shifts, because within the body of South Africa, away from the wine regions, we are seeing a huge amount of drought conditions, much higher 5 degree, 6 degree increases, which is meaning you're getting migration of people, population, which is going to have much heavier impacts on obviously water resources.
Is there any hope? Is there any solutions, or what are you doing to maybe counteract this?
Part of the solution is really trying to create better conditions to save water, so clearly bigger dams, more dams. We're already seeing right now we've got 128 days before our water runs out, 25% fill heights for the dams. So we need more dams, better ways to protect it, and importantly, better ways to not lose the water, because we have a huge amount of faulty pipes and a lot of water is lost, 30, 40, 50%. In some of the regions of South Africa, in the Western Cape, it's sort of like 15, 20%. Clearly in the future, there's obviously looking at trying to use recycled water, which is what Europe does right now. And obviously, if we look at things like Israel, they're using a huge amount of desalination plants. That may be something that may be possible here, but will come at quite a large expense.
After the break, we will find out what makes a rosé, and we'll be visiting a very high-end niche winery. Follow us for this exclusive look into Holden Mans.
Done.
Located in the top southernmost corner of the Franschhoek Valley, Holden Mans Wine Estate is situated between the Franschhoek River and Stony Brook at 300 meters above sea level.
Welcome to Holden Mans. As you can see, spectacular views all around. But before we do anything, cheers. Cheers. Cheers, cheers. What you've got in your glasses before you sip is a Provence-style, Shiraz-based rosé. This wine specifically is whole bunch pressed, so it's got no skin contact. The reason for the color comes directly from the pressing.
Wayne took us to the exclusive cellar. We have visited industrial site cellars in the past, but now it was time to visit the other end of the spectrum.
This is where wine actually turns into the wine that we're drinking. We use French oak 100%. We don't go anywhere near Hungary or the American oak, purely because the French oak works better than us, or better with our wines.
Wine explains why wooden barrels work best at Holden Mans.
The reason for aging wines in wooden barrels is two parts. One, the wine actually needs to age. It has to mature within the wood. Secondly, the wood gives flavor. Now, flavor is very important, and that's why I'm talking about French oak. American oak will give a sweeter sort of vanilla style, and Hungarian oak will give a more spicier style of wines. Whereas the French oak that we use is perfect for South African wines. We talk about in barrel aging, we talk about first fill, second fill, third fill. That is purely meant in how many times this barrel has been used.
Holden Mans' focus is on smaller production. Wayne showed us the cellar. The process is very similar to the other cellars that we've visited previously, but here they focus on much smaller production.
So we would use the Cabernet Franc from very certain blocks, which are situated north of where we're standing right now, about 50 meters north. The Cabernet Franc's grapes will go onto this conveyor belt. Anything that doesn't look 100% will be taken off and put away. We only make about 1,600 bottles of, so it's super premium.
Wayne shares more on Holden Mans and what wine means to him. So Holden Mans is a very exclusive and high-end, I would say, getaway. Can you tell me a little bit more about one of your top high-end wine that you were mentioning earlier on?
With our terroir that we've got on this farm and the climate that we have, we grow an unbelievable Cabernet Franc. So the Big G would be our flagship. The 2012 won double gold amongst and Michelangelo amongst many other awards, and it's the go-to guy.
So far we've learned how to make an MCC, how climate change impacts the wine industry, and we've just visited an exclusive niche winery. Join us after the break as we conclude everything you need to know about wine at one of South Africa's top distributors. We will also be speaking to Wosa's Africa and South America's market manager. We went to visit Labori, one of the oldest wineries in South Africa, dating back to 1691. The winery was bought by one of South Africa's biggest distributors back in the 70s. Francesca shared Labori's story.
Lubbery was granted to a French Huguenot in 1691, Jean Taillefer, and the family came from Lubbery in France. That's why they called their farm Lubbery, and apparently the Latin word labour means to labour.
A little bit about KWV itself. It was established in 1918, so next year we'll be 100 years old. And it was started as a cooperative. KWV actually stands for Kaapse Wynbouwersvereniging van Suid-Afrika, that's Dutch. It basically means Cooperative of Wine Growers Association of South Africa. And the purpose of KWV was really to market South African wines overseas. We've got quite a vast range of wines, of which Lubbery is one of the brands that we own. In Ghana, you would have noticed that we do a lot of Pearly Bay. Pearly Bay is from the KWV stable, and then obviously the KWV brand of wines.
We were then taken through a full 360 of wine information.
The Dutch came first, and that's actually only a couple of years after the Dutch came in 1562. They almost immediately started making or planting vines. So Jan van Riebeeck, the first Dutchman that came to establish the Cape Colony, he started basically, I think in the first 4 years after landing here, they actually started harvesting the first grapes. It was quite bad, but you know, that was the first time.
We were shown through the 4 senses of wine.
We call it the 4 S's of wine tasting, you all know. The first S is sight. You tilt your wine glass slightly, normally with a white background. You're welcome to do it if you want to. And then you look at the color of the wine. So here you will see it's a nice see-through color. The reason for that, it's straight from the tank. We didn't put it in a barrel. Once a wine is in a barrel, it's more yellowish. And once it's an older white wine, it's also more yellowish. So the second S is you swill it. You widen the surface to get more flavors and aromas. And then you smell it. So here you will pick up a lot of green apple, green grass, tropical guava. And then you sip it. Roll it around in your mouth and enjoy it.
If you have ever wondered how long you can keep wine for, well, here's your answer.
Sorry, white wine you can actually open and drink it over 3 days. Red wine over 4 days or so.
If you open white wine, don't leave it out. You know, it needs to be chilled. And red wine you can leave out. But the more you've drunk of it, the more oxygen gets into it, the more it oxidizes, and the more obviously it changes the taste profile of the wine. It won't go off easily. It won't go off at all. It won't go off easily. It's got alcohol in it. Alcohol is a preservative. It's got certain amounts of sugar in it. It's a preservative. So all of that is all fine. But it will alter the taste of the wine, and eventually it will taste quite bad.
What is meant by corked?
When wine is corked, it means that the cork didn't seal properly, and that's on most occasions. Sometimes the corks do have like an algae on it, or not an algae, but an organism on it that actually affects the taste of the wine. So the cork should be sterile. Sometimes it's not, especially when you use real cork. The synthetic corks won't have those organisms on it that affects the taste of the wine. But normally it means that air has gotten through the cork. Now what happens normally when you age wine that's corked, if you have it stand upright, the cork dries out and dries out and dries out, and it shrinks, and then obviously it doesn't seal properly anymore. That's why wine is kept on its side, so that the wine keeps the cork wet and expanded. That's why our top range wines, and you'll see all of our wines, have got screw caps. It actually just reduces the risk of the wine getting corked or getting damaged. It's not an indication whether the wine is cheap or expensive. In fact, our Mentos range, which is our second to the top tier, is actually screw caps.
What should you do if you have cork at the bottom of your wine bottle?
When cork is at the bottom of a glass, I mean, for a lot of well-aged fortified wines that's 40 years old, there's a lot of residue in there. You just have to pour it through a sieve and it's all drinkable, it's all fine. But when the taste is altered, it's not because physically the cork is in the wine, because the wine touches the cork anyway. That means that something else has gone wrong. It's either been in contact with oxygen, or it's there's something that came in there that's not supposed to be there. You know, like an organism, a living organism that's not supposed to be there.
If you have older wines, here's what to do.
Older wines, you decant it into a decanter. And the decanter is designed in a way that actually makes those residues go to the bottom, and it stays behind until such a time as you've poured the last little drop. That's why a decanter is shaped like that. So when you pour it, it won't, because normally when you use a bottle like this, now the residue has come to the bottom, and now you pour it, And now you pour it. Like now it's coming out, but all the while the residue is coming out and it's just going to go into your glass. That's why a decanter is shaped like that at the bottom. You know what I'm talking about, like a teardrop. So it's shaped like that. So you can pour and pour and pour and pour, and the residue will just go to the bottom end of that.
Is it wine etiquette to send back a bottle of wine in a restaurant?
If there's nothing wrong with the wine, because now obviously that's where the grey line is, you know, when is a wine off and when do you just not like the taste of it. On many occasions you travel or when you go, you open a bottle of wine, you're like, nah, it's not particularly my taste, but it's either it's not corked or it's not rotten or whatever, or too aged, then you pay for it. Then it's just one of those things. That's a chance you take when you go to a restaurant and you order a meal and the pepper steak is too peppery or not peppery enough. That's one of those things.
Next up, we speak to Wines of South Africa and South America's market manager, Matome Mbatha.
Matome, thank you very much for this opportunity. You are the Africa Market Manager for Wines of South Africa. Tell us a little bit about the importance of wine to South Africa's tourism industry.
Thanks for this opportunity. Wines of South Africa is an export marketing council. Our key focus is to position brand South Africa in the international markets, and I primarily focus on the African continent. And in terms of tourism, it's quite a broad subject, but it's so important because wine is experience. And what that means is that people who drink wine and consume wine need to have the feel of what the wine is, where it comes from. So tourism factor of it is that then people get to visit the wineries and get the feel of what has the product got to do and how it's been produced. Pretty much the same experience that you've had visiting South Africa.
Even more than just the visits to the wineries, you have restaurants, you have so many things that are allied to the wine industry. And for me as an outsider looking in, it seems to have a positive knock-on effect on the tourism industry. Wouldn't you think so?
Indeed, I mean, it's very important and it's very critical area to showcase the diversification of the product wine as a juice, but above all is the fact that people who make wine live in a certain area, consume food and do pairing of food with wine. So all of those elements put together the very thing that wine is about. It's about socializing. It's about bringing people together. So tourism, food, experience, engaging with the people who make wine is all about a collective and a holistic approach to wine as a product.
What lessons do you think other African countries can learn from South Africa with regard to the way you are using wine to grow your tourism?
Number one, value addition. If you're going to be producing anything, be it gold that is extracted as natural resources, value add at all times. So if we, for example, exported our grapes as they are, we wouldn't have had the value that we're getting out of now showcasing the tourism side of it, out of showcasing the beauty of the food, the ambience that we've actually been experiencing throughout the week. So value add at all times in anything that is produced anywhere in the world, primarily focusing in the continent. We need to always think about what more can we do with the natural resources that we have. Grapes are our natural resources, and through the grapes we are producing wine, we're producing food that is paired with wine, we're giving people that come and eat the food an experience. So that's the main message I would like to give.
Let's now talk about your job and your responsibility for taking South Africa to Africa. I mean, let's talk about the penetration of South African wines in your capacity as Wosa Africa Area Manager.
It brings me joy to actually just share that the South African wine industry is now focusing and strategically looking at growing presence of the South African wines in the continent. So much so that because this is it's an African product, which means Africans need to consume it with, first of all, appreciation and loving the fact that it's their own product. It's not a South African product. It's a product from the continent. Remember the southern tip of the continent, but it's part of you, therefore consume it as such. It's going to be value add in a sense that it's talking to intra-trade within the continent. It's imagine a situation us pairing South African wine with Ghanaian food. Amongst other things, those are things that will value add. So as an industry, we are investing in those areas. We are investing in educating our consumers in the different markets. Consumers in Ghana, for example, are now being taught about wine. How to take their learnings to levels that are value add For example, they can be now trained to be sommeliers at places like restaurants, hotels. So in a way, South African wine industry is strongly going to markets with a vision of adding value. We're not there to just dump wine, but to add value to people's lives.
Tell us about your Ghana experience to date.
Amazing. I mean, it's to me my second home in a sense that I was telling the fellow colleagues about my experience in the Labadi Beach, because I felt that hanging out in that area, in that space, there's so much potential and so much opportunity of doing alignment of South African wine with the experience and the vibrance of the actual Labadi Beach. And I could say of many other places. I've been to Sky Bar, I've been to many other places within Accra, but I think there's so much potential that's untapped. And that's what my intention is, to actually grow South African presence, marry it with the Ghanaian experience so that it's all lovely and driving the actual agenda of intertrade within the continent.
I love it, the way you want us to think of it as not just a South African product, but an African product made in Africa. And that brings a sense of inclusiveness and a relationship that has been forged together. So I really love that point. Finally, I want you to look down ahead into the next 5-10 years maybe. Tell us about what you think the future of South African wines will look like.
This year, 2017, would mean our third installment of us hosting generic wine event in Accra. I can just see it grow beyond that, not just being an once-off annual event, further investment so that at least we continue. Build up wine clubs, build up sort of activations that will ensure that Ghanaians have an understanding of how they can marry South Africa with Ghana. And that's the future. The more we work together, the better it is for the continent. And I cannot see anything else but this very special drink that we have. South Africa's got it, Ghana's got the offering, let's do it.
Is there anything else you want to tell somebody watching you right now? Whether it's South Africa, whether it's your wines, whether it's your presence in Ghana, anything else you want to add on?
I would say, perhaps from learning from this whole documentary and the visit of the media here, we're giving you a visual experience of the wine lens from production to consumption and experience. You are making a mistake to be going elsewhere in the world for holiday. This is the place to come for tourism. Likewise, as I've expressed, that the places like Labadi Beach are about what South Africans would like to experience. Let's visit each other and let's marry each other and just find harmony in working together.
Siyabonga, thank you.
Yabonga, thanks.
Thank you for joining us on this wine odyssey in the Western Cape of South Africa, as we took you through a whole 360 of winemaking, from the picking, production, fermenting, marketing, and of course meeting the people behind the process. We really hope that you enjoyed this journey with us as much as we did. Cheers!